It started with my own health problems, but even before that, when I was 11 years old, my dad died of a massive heart attack in my arms. It took him about 4 hours to die. And I had watched the medical doctors work with my dad with no help over the previous couple months. When I was 14, my mom died of a massive heart attack, and by the time I was 16, I was diagnosed with having heart deformities myself. The doctors actually diagnosed me with valvular deformities of the heart. They said that my heart valves from birth were deformed, that they would not pump the blood correctly through my heart, my chambers would flood at the wrong time, and that if I didn't have surgical correction by the time I was 20, I'd most likely be dead. They said that the heart, the way it malfunctioned, would not be able to pump blood to an adult body. And I knew they were right because I was feeling horrible. I was finding that every day I would have pain in my chest. I would have pain radiating down my left arm. I would have massive palpitations to where I would lose my peripheral vision and I would pass out sometimes 2-3 times a day. So I was in an outpatient clinic at a hospital, and I asked them, could I be helped by any other means besides surgery? Because obviously at 16 I was very scared of the thought of having open heart surgery. And they said no, and I said, what about herbs? My great aunt was a German gypsy herbalist, healed the family of the common cold and that type of thing. And they said absolutely not, there was no herbs that would help. And I said, what about food? I had seen health food stores, or exercise. I knew people exercise helped. They said, for your condition, nothing will help. They said, unless you have the surgery, that's it. So I was taking drugs that they suggested. I was in the outpatient clinic at the hospital. I met another young man who had the same problem, and we talked about it, and he was scheduled for his surgery a few weeks before mine. Well, he died on the table, and when I heard that news, a wave of fear went over me from the tips of my toes to the top of my head, and I realized that I was very ill, I needed help, but sawing my rib cage in half and sticking a knife in my heart didn't sound like a healing experience at all. And I walked. I walked from the hospital. I had a lot of fear, but fear can be a tremendous motivational tool to help people change, and it certainly was for me. So the first person I ran into was a Zen Buddhist monk, and he said, eat less red meat, it's better for your heart. Hey, at that point, I would have taken donkey manure mixed with battery acid if I thought it would help. So I stopped eating red meat. And I came from a German family, blood for breakfast, lunch, dinner, and dessert. And so it was a bit difficult at first. But hey, when you have that much fear, when a doctor tells you you're going to die, I was willing to do anything. And so I stopped eating red meat, and I felt a little better. And then eventually someone else told me, well, chicken, turkey, even though they have maybe less fat or less cholesterol, they're still not good for your heart. So I became at that point what I call a lacto vegetarian, which basically means that all I ate was eggs and dairy products. I would have cheese omelets for breakfast and a glass of milk, a milkshake and a toasted cheese sandwich for lunch, and probably some dairy for dessert. And I was still feeling tremendously better just on that dietary change, but then learned that there was massive amounts of saturated fat and cholesterol in dairy products, and at that point I became what's called a vegan, or a pure vegetarian, meaning that I ate only fruits and vegetables, grains, nuts, and seeds. And it was a bit startling at first. I remember looking in my refrigerator and there was nothing in it. And so I lost some weight, panicked, but eventually got the hang of it. And I felt tremendous. My incidence of my heart problems had gone down dramatically. And then I was told that I needed to exercise to have a healthy heart. So living in New York, I decided to start studying the martial arts. I figured that I could learn how to protect myself from muggers and at the same time do some cardiovascular exercise. So I got involved in the martial arts. I also learned that I had to open my elimination channels. I was having about 1 bowel movement a week. Seemed fine to me because I remember that's what my dad had, was 1 bowel movement a week. And so I had to learn how to clean and rejuvenate and strengthen my elimination channels. And also, I realized that my family, I call it 1950s Leave It to Beaver dysfunctional, but my family wasn't the most psychotherapeutic correct group. And we argued a lot at the dinner table. We all had indigestion. And I had to go through some emotional healing, too, because I learned that that was a very important part of my heart being well. Nobody has a healthy heart who is hateful. You have to learn how to give love and receive love if you want your heart to be healthy. The long and short of this is, at the end of 3 years, I went back to the hospital. They put me through 2 stress tests, electrocardiograms, x-rays, and they said that my heart valves were perfect. And they said that it was a miracle. And I said it wasn't a miracle. I said I did a lot of work. I took herbs. I ate different foods. I went through exercise. I got involved in psychotherapy. And they said that wouldn't do it. They said you had a spontaneous remission. But I knew they were wrong. I knew that I had healed myself. And even in the process, I was doing such a good job. People were knocking on my door, first friends and relatives, and then just the general public, because they knew I had something. And basically what I had just done is changed my lifestyle to be healthier. And so that was my first introduction into natural healing.
Chapter 1.
Chapter 1. A few years later, while I was preparing, working in a lab, making herbal preparations, we had a tremendous explosion, and a 5-gallon container of boiling oil in flames spilled all over my right hand. And this is my hand here. It spilled and covered my hand. I was burnt severely. After a couple days, I realized that I had done damage that I didn't even know how to repair to my hand. So I went to a friend of mine, a colleague who's a doctor, and he said, you need to see a burn specialist. And he gave me the name, and I went. The burn specialist examined my hand and said that I had 4th-degree burns, the worst possible burn. He said that all the tissue was gone right to the bone. And I said, it doesn't look that way to me. And at that point, he took a tweezers and he pulled the tissue off right here on my finger, and it opened up just a charred black bone. In fact, I have some pictures for you of this. And it was just charred bone. The tendons, the ligaments gone, the muscle gone, Amazing. Just charred bone. My entire thumb casing came right off, nail, everything, tissue, muscle, everything. It was pretty ugly. I went to see the burn specialist, and he said, well, you have 4th-degree burns. And I said, what does that mean? And he said, what that means is that all the tissue is gone right to the bone. The tissue's dead. And he said, you need a skin graft. And I said, why? And he said, because skin can't grow from thin air. He said, it just can't grow from thin air. He goes, and since all your skin's dead, we need to graft skin onto there. And I thought, okay. And he says, take your pants off. And I thought, why is he asking me to take my pants off? And he was looking at my butt. And I thought, why is he doing this? And he said, well, we have to have somewhere to get the skin. And it was like, whoa! I pulled those pants up real quick. And I thought maybe they had donors for skin. I didn't know. And he said, no, we take the skin off your rear end, and that's what we put on your hand. And immediately, the bell went off again. Here's another doctor trying to tell me that my body won't heal itself. And I walked right out of his office. I knew that I could grow skin back. And I went home. I immediately started juice fasting. What we'll go into later is what I call the Incurables program. In 30 days, I had skin covering my entire hand.
It grew.
It grew. It grew back. And I did everything. Believe me, I worked 18 hours a day to get this skin back. I went back to the doctor, and he goes, this is a miracle. I've heard that before. He goes, this is amazing. He goes, I've never seen this. And I thought, no wonder you've never seen this. You've never given the body a chance to repair itself, because you put a graft on there. You never put people on juice therapy, clean the elimination organs. If anything, you give them pain medication that would slow down the healing process. Of course, this doctor had never seen that. So basically, at that point, he said, let me look at your hand. He goes, this is a miracle. You've had a miracle. He goes, but bend it. And I couldn't bend my hand. And he goes, see, there's a problem here. He goes, because you didn't have the graft, we're going to have to make about 50 incisions now in all the scar tissue so you can use the hand. And I thought, oh, no. And then the bell went off again. What's he telling me? My body won't repair itself, or if it repairs itself, it won't do it correctly. And I remember, too, when I first started the practice of yoga, I couldn't touch my toes. I couldn't even see my toes. So I knew that if I went home and worked, I could get the strength of my hand back and also the flexibility and mobility. And I worked for another month stretching my hand. It took me 2 weeks to touch these two fingers together, and now I have total usage of my hand. It looks a little different in spots, but it works without any skin grafts. So this is just another classic example of how your body will heal itself if you give it a chance.
Now, Richard, you were Dr. Christopher's leading student and still are. Now, when Dr. Christopher said there are no incurable diseases, most people thought that was just a statement to attract attention.
Absolutely. They thought it was a statement, and they thought that maybe there were exceptions. And even in my training with Dr. Christopher, even though I was a believer in my hand and my heart, but I saw people that were blind that Dr. Christopher helped restore their eyesight. I have to admit, even I was a little weak at first next to Dr. Christopher, because he was the greatest believer that I've ever been with or around. And eventually that rubbed off on me. I became an absolute believer, and now I know without a shadow of a doubt there are no incurable diseases. Everybody can be well if they want it bad enough.
Now, you're saying that not just because you believe it, you've seen it.
I've seen it in my practice. I've been working with people for 20 years now, and I've seen people with bone cancer, over 90% of their body. I've seen people with 90% of their coronary arteries blocked. I've seen people with advanced diabetes, blood clots, brain tumors, diverticulosis, breast cancer, you name it. I've seen it, and I've seen them walk away healthy using natural methods.
Well, when they walked in your door or when they called you, how bad? Just how bad were they?
My average patient, in my clinic, we refer to them many times as the walking dead. We do that to their faces, too, because we have to joke about it. And the reason we say that is because most people that call me up have at least been supposed to be dead for 2 months. In other words, the doctor said they were to be dead in January. They call me in March. So usually the best chance I get is a patient that's already supposed to be dead for 2 months. I consider that lucky if I get a patient that's only supposed to be dead 2 months. Usually it's 4, 5, 6, sometimes a year. I had a woman in my clinic a couple months ago that was supposed to have been dead 30 years ago with leukemia that was still alive. And I think the best reason she was alive is she ignored the doctors, didn't believe what they said, and just went out and lived her life. But basically what I have learned is that everybody, regardless of what's wrong with you, regardless of what anybody said, forget what everybody says. You know, when the doctors say to you, when they say to any patient, when they say there's nothing that can be done, what they mean to say is there's nothing that can be done that I know. They're egomaniacs. They don't want to let the patient know that there might be other methods that they don't know about or that they don't understand. And that could be anything from herbs to psychic surgery. But there are thousands of other ways to heal yourself outside of traditional, or what we might call modern orthodox medicine and pharmaceuticals in this country. But doctors won't tell their patients about it. They're afraid of it. They're afraid to say they don't know. And what's unfortunate, and we've talked about this before, is most holistic and alternative doctors, they won't take on people that are really sick. Most of my colleagues work with people who are very fit and well to help them get more fit and well. And if you're a little bit sick, maybe they'll bend the rules, but I don't know anybody that I can refer someone to that's terminally ill. Most your holistic practitioners, your alternative practitioners, don't have any experience there, or they're non-believers themselves, or when they or their family gets sick, they go to the doctor.
Now, Richard, it seems to me that you're somewhat of a misfit in the holistic community, aren't you?
Absolutely. In the holistic community, in the herbal community, it's lonely out there as a natural healer because most people aren't believers. They just aren't believers. In fact, if you look at 99% of the books that are written on the market about holistic and alternative healing and herbs, I would suggest that the people who wrote them didn't know what they were talking about. And if there is valuable information in there, the information's about the chemicals in an herb and what those chemicals do in your body, but it just doesn't tell people how to use those herbs and how to get well. And that's what's missing in most of the publications, most of the books out there, is it doesn't tell you how to get well.
Now, you're You cure the incurable.
Absolutely.
And one would think that your colleagues would be standing up applauding.
Yeah.
Now, is that the case?
No, not at all. In fact, I've been blackballed for teaching in many, many states, in many areas around the world. I have books that have been refused to be published. This subject makes people very nervous. It not only makes medical doctors very nervous, it certainly makes the pharmaceutical industry very nervous, but it makes all my friends in alternative and holistic healing and herbology very nervous. They all are reflected upon their limitations, and they also reflect upon their own fear. The first thing that I had to acknowledge when I started practice was that all my patients will die. The inevitable end for all of us is a physical death, and they're afraid right there. Okay, they don't want a patient that dies. They think that that'll blemish their record. I mean, it's not dying that we're trying to stop. It's the quality of life that we're trying to increase and also have people die with dignity. We're all going to end up in the same place physically, and so there's nothing to be afraid of. So I wasn't afraid of my patients dying. I almost died myself. So my first rule was I took on anybody and everybody, and immediately I used to have a line out my door of the dead, the tumors on the neck. Everybody would come to see me because they found that other holistic practitioners wouldn't work with them.
Richard, have you ever had any trouble with the authorities?
Yeah. I remember my first memory of my run-in with authorities was hearing my front and back door slammed down with battering rams, bulletproof vest officers coming in with machine guns, raiding my offices, my clinic, my home. Confiscating herbs, tearing the place apart.
What were you doing, selling crack?
I have patients that used to be drug dealers that have recovered from their diseases and their habits, and I don't know anybody that was treated worse than me by the police and the authorities.
So you sold herbs?
Yeah, I sold herbs and I got people well. That's the key.
Well, that sounds like Dr. Christopher.
Absolutely.
It's a repeat.
Absolutely. You know, I was with Dr. Christopher many times, and he was arrested 6 times. 6 times during his career.
Yeah, I know at one point he was in jail, couldn't earn a living.
Couldn't earn a living. His family was thrown out of the house. They lived in cars on the streets. I mean, he sacrificed a lot to preach the word of natural healing in his lifetime.
Well, they didn't like either one of you.
Oh, they don't like me at all. In fact, I was with Dr. Christopher at times when he made a lot of people unhappy with what he said. I remember one time we were at a nutritional convention with 350 distributors of vitamins and minerals. He was the keynote speaker, and the first thing he said in his speech in the first minute was the only thing wrong with everything he saw out there was it was all dead. And he suggested people eat live foods and get the vitamins and minerals and enzymes from the foods.
What'd they do, cheer him?
Not from pills. Yeah, they put a hook around his neck, got him off stage, had us both out of there. And I've been barred from many events in the industry just because of that circumstance, and then certainly from carrying on the tradition of natural healing.
Wait,
and
so you're
herbology.
curing people and you're not a big person in the herbal industry in America today?
Most of the industries don't even want to admit I'm around. They call me Dirty Harry.
For what?
Because no one wants to admit I'm there. No one wants to work with people that have incurable diseases. But when they or their families get sick, I get many calls from these doctors and these herbalists to help them or their family. But for the rest of the time, they don't even want to admit that I exist.
Well, it sounds like between the feds and the people in your own industry, no one wants to hear about you, which is all the more reason for readers to learn what to do and how to do it.
Absolutely. You know, we have to look at medicine and pharmaceuticals as a $900 billion industry in this country. They don't want anyone in this country to hear what we're talking about
they
here today.
Well,
Yeah.
that we knew. But the health food people, that's a shock.
Oh, absolutely. The naturopaths were the final people to have Dr. Christopher arrested. He was working on 90 people a day in his clinic. Now, 90 people a day were coming there because they were getting well. He was healing and curing the incurables. He took all their business away. They wanted this man in jail. Some of my worst enemies are people in my own field, herbalists, natural healers.
Well, today we're not going to worry about them. We're just going to tell people how to get
Absolutely.
well. You told me about a little girl you're treating right now.
Mm-hmm.
She's how old?
4 years old.
How bad is it?
She has a malignant brain tumor. It's on her brain stem. The doctors have suggested that they cannot do surgery at all, and they suggested chemotherapy and radiation. And they said that even with the chemo and therapy and radiation, she would probably be dead in 2 or 3 months. So the prognosis was horrible. So I like cases like this because they don't want to work with the medical doctors because there's no hope. And the one thing that I do is I sell hope. See, being a believer myself, and of course coming from a great man like Dr. Christopher was a great believer, and healing my own heart and healing my own hand, what I know is that everybody can be well. And so I tell them they can be well. I offer hope. Doctors offer no hope. We'll talk later about what it does to your immune system when a doctor says you're dead, but it's not a healing. No. And so I offer the family hope. And the bottom line is that even if she does not survive, she'll be happier and healthier than she would be going through the medical treatment. The first thing they would have done, the first thing I noticed with this young girl when she came in my office is she had beautiful blonde hair down to here with about 30 different bows in it. And what do you think that kid's immune system would be like when she goes bald with the chemotherapy and radiation?
It won't go up.
That's right. It won't go up. It won't be a healing. And it'll just get worse from there. So the parents were horrified by the medical prognosis. They are not what we might call hip people or alternative people or holistic people. But they decided that this made more sense than doing what the medical doctors suggest.
How is she doing?
She's doing better. She's off all her drugs. She has some slight paralysis, and we're hoping that tumor's going to shrink and just go away. And I believe it will.
What are you doing for her?
Everything. Everything. And I think that what we'll do is we'll go over the entire program.
Point by point.
Point by point. At the end of this video, it's specifically every category and what to do.
Dr. Christopher cured the incurable. He said it, you saw it, then you did it yourself.
Absolutely.
But what I've been seeing in people following what I believe to be his programs today is it's not happening. It just isn't happening. Yeah. What's going on? Why aren't people now curing the incurables?
I think,
like he did.
Yeah, I think one of the things is Dr. Christopher was a very powerful person, and I think one of the things is without his presence, first of all, people don't realize when Dr. Christopher says, you ask, well, when do you have enough yarrow tea? And he says, tip your head to the side, and if it doesn't pour out your ear, have another cup. He meant that. When people said they vomited, and he said, well, a cleaner stomach for the next dose, he meant that. He was a very intense man, and he knew what it took to get people well, and he was willing to do whatever was necessary to get them well. And I feel that some of that intensity has been lost over the years since he passed on, and people just think that these so-called, herb in a bottle might fix them, and it isn't going to happen. Certainly herbs are a powerful healing tool, but they need to be used with a program of natural healing.
Well, you were pointing out to me yesterday that he lived in the Southwest. He used herbs from the Southwest.
Absolutely.
He used fresh herbs from the Southwest, and that's all been forgotten.
It's a horror story. Most of the herbal products on the market today in the United States are made from herbs that are grown outside the United States, and there's a simple reason for this. The average annual salary in India, I think, is about $20. So you can pay someone pennies a day to pick herbs over there. So most of the herbs that are used in the commercial trade in this country are grown in India, China, Egypt, Eastern Europe, and Mexico. Now most of us, if we travel to those countries, wouldn't even eat the food. So why are we taking the herbs from those countries? Plus those countries use massive amounts of insecticides and pesticides. They still use DDT. It's legal in those countries. And so these are very poor quality herbs that are coming into the United States. Now get this, American agri-laws say that all herbs that are imported into this country are subject to irradiation and fumigation. So even if these herbs came in organic, there's a good chance that they'll be sprayed or irradiated when they come in. So the bottom line is the cheaper herbs, the herbs that all the manufacturers use in this country, are very low quality. Their chemical content is very low. The chance of them working for you is very low. They're just not going to work the way that you hope they would. Dr. Christopher used the herbs that grew around his area. He used herbs from the southwest United States. Look it out here. I mean, we have thousands of plants growing right here in your backyard. This is what we need to get to know better. This is what we need to use.
But that's how he cured the
Absolutely.
incurable.
And so this is one of the things wrong with the program now is people are using herbal formulas that are not potent. They're not chemically potent because it's the chemicals in those plants. A great example is juniper berries on the commercial market in the United States that come from Eastern Europe are about $1.50 a pound. They're these brown little dried balls. I pay about $22 a pound for my juniper berries. They're bright blue to purple. They're soft, they're chewy, and there's oil inside them. Now, when I give them to patients, their urinary tract infections go away first time. That's not going to happen.
Even if they've been using Dr. Christopher's formula from a capsule from a store.
Absolutely.
And didn't work.
Absolutely. And the problem is it's the chemicals in these herbs that make them work, that make them get rid of infections in our body, that help them clear arteries, that'll even cure cancer. The problem is the quality of the plants that we buy nowadays is not very good. And so the chemical content is very low, and they're just not going to do what you think they would do. I mean, I sample all the time herbs out of the health food store, and I'm shocked at so many of these herbal formulas that are out there. Echinacea, golden seal. I taste them, and I can't taste any echinacea and any golden seal.
What do you mean you can't taste it?
In other words, all herbs have what I might call their signature when you chew them and taste them. When I studied herbology, my goal was to learn 1,000 herbs by sight, smell, and taste. Not only their Latin names and the chemicals in them, but I wanted to be able to identify them. And one thing I noticed is that every herb had a strong taste, if you learned it. Licorice is very sweet. Cayenne is very hot. Peppermint is very minty. Every herb has a signature. Echinacea, when you chew the root, even the leaf, it makes your whole mouth tingle. Your salivary glands are excited. Your mouth even feels like it's going numb. I can drink a whole bottle, a 1-2 ounce bottle of most of the preparations on the market, and I don't get that at all. And 1 or 2 drops of a tincture should do that.
So that means if someone's terminally ill and they're doing this because Dr. Christopher said so, they're not going to get
Unfortunately,
well.
the program's good, but what is available to them is not well. It's not going to help them get well. Absolutely.
And then another factor we talked about, number one, the healers today don't believe it.
Yeah, they don't believe it.
That's number one.
And so because they don't believe it, they never learned it. Do you know what
Right.
I'm saying? So they don't even have the knowledge. Even if they became a believer overnight, they'd have to go back to school or go to a school and learn what natural healing is from the ground up because they're not believers.
And then number two, they don't have the quality.
That's
They're not
right.
using the herbs like he used them. They
That's
don't have
right.
the quality herbs.
That's right. Most people would be better off going out into their backyard, picking some plants like the plants we'll show later, and making their own herbal preparations, and I guarantee them it would be 10 times stronger than what they could buy in the health food store most of the time. It's that bad out there.
Don't think people know it.
No, they don't. Absolutely not. So we have to really change the industry to get better quality herbal products and also educate people. People need to learn what good quality herbs are and add this to the natural healing programs. Because remember, herbs, I consider herbs like the roof. A roof of a house doesn't do any good without a good foundation, and the foundation is what Dr. Christopher called the food program, the exercise program, the attitude program, the elimination cleansing programs. That's the whole foundation, and then herbs are used to achieve those individual things and to put it all together. And unfortunately, most practitioners today aren't doing that. They're expecting the herbs to work miracles. And it's the lazy way out. It's the easy way out.
But that wasn't his way.
Not at all. It wasn't his way at all. He believed in a lot of hard work. Everybody's looking for a good doctor. I'm looking for good patients. That's what I always say to my patients. And also, most of my patients come in and they say, I'm willing to do anything that's necessary to be well. And in about 10 minutes, they're not willing anymore once they find out what anything is. Sometimes I use the analogy, I say everybody wants a Rolls Royce, but when you see what the payments are, the Volkswagen starts looking better. Okay, and this is where people are at. It takes work to get well, and that's why we developed medicine. We wanted to create drugs that would try to balance out the destructive habits we've had all our life, our emotional, our physical habits, and it just doesn't work. They're trying to create such potent chemicals now. They want to destroy cancer. Cancer is the byproduct of an unhealthy lifestyle, and that's the bottom line. What's unfortunate, and we've talked about this before, is most holistic and alternative doctors, they won't take on people that are really sick. Most of my colleagues work with people who are very fit and well to help them get more fit and well. And if you're a little bit sick, maybe they'll bend the rules, but I don't know anybody that I can refer someone to that's terminally ill. Most your holistic practitioners, your alternative practitioners, don't have any experience there, or they're non-believers themselves, or when they or their family gets sick, they go to the doctor. No one wants to admit that I'm out there and around, but when the healers themselves get sick, they call me. They call me to find out what the programs are. But if they had to, they'd never refer a patient to me. And so I'm a person, and this is the same way Dr. Christopher was. It's a bit of a thorn in their side because they don't understand natural healing. They don't understand the dedication that's important for the patient to take on. They don't know the programs, and therefore their patients don't get well. Herbs are not a magic pill. I find that most herbalists are looking at herbs the same way a doctor looks at pharmaceuticals. Let's try to find an herb to cure a problem, and it doesn't work that way. Most terminal diseases, or what we might call incurable diseases, are created from not only genetic constitutional weaknesses from your family, but a lifestyle that was promotive to get sick. And so to get well, it isn't just going to be a matter of taking an herb. You have to change that lifestyle. You have to change that environment. You have to make changes like I talked about with me, with the elimination channels, with the food program, with the exercise, with the blood circulation, with the attitude. And that's how you get well.
Now, Richard, what's the first step? A patient walks in, they've got a massive tumor, they got 4 weeks to go, they walk in the doors, hello, doctor. Where do you start?
The first step in any health program from A to Z is opening the elimination channels, and there's a couple good reasons for this. One is if you begin a cleansing program and your bowel or your liver or your kidneys are not working properly, you're going to feel horrible. And this is what happens to many people, because when you detoxify, you're drawing poisons and toxins and drug residues out of your fat cells, out of your muscle tissue. It's all circulating in your body, and if it can't get out, you could feel worse than you've ever felt in your life. So the first most important step in the Incurables program is opening the elimination channels, and the most important one is the bowel, getting the bowel to work.
But most people, at least in the natural movement, believe they have done that.
Yeah.
They have taken herbal formulas to cleanse their bowel and all that.
And I think that this is something that we can always work on. The incidence of disease in this country is very reflective of the bowel. Merck's manual, which is the standard book of diagnosis and prognosis for the medical industry, and that's written by Merck, Sharp and Dohme, one of the largest drug manufacturers in the world. In the 1950s, they said 10% of American adults had bowel herniation. In the 70s, 30%. In the 80s, 40%. And in the most recent edition of Merck's manual, the 16th edition, they say that everybody will eventually have diverticulosis or herniation of the bowel. So if we're all going to have it, we need to clean out our bowels. We need to constantly clean out our bowels. Medicine is just now starting to acknowledge what Dr. Christopher talked about 30 and 40 years ago. He used to say that everybody, as they got old, if they didn't clean their bowel, had bowel pockets. The doctors laughed at him. They laughed at him. They roared at him. And now the doctors and the pharmaceutical groups are saying that everybody will have bowel pockets. And even in the Merck manual, when you look about what to do for these bowel pockets, it says a high-fiber diet's recommended, a diet of grains, vegetables, and fruits. They're talking natural healing here. This is our food program we'll get into. So the very, very, very first step is opening the elimination channels, and the bowel is the best place to start. We got to get that bowel working.
What is step 2?
Step 2 is looking at the other elimination channels, the liver, the kidneys, the skin, the lungs, the major elimination channels, and making sure they're working too, because the bowel isn't the only one. It may be what I consider the most important, but it's not the only one. So we have to look at the liver. And we have to begin some programs to get that liver cleaned out. In your newsletter, you've had my reports on the liver flush. And that's a great breakfast morning drink for someone to start flushing their liver out. And you can use herbs and teas to flush that liver. Make sure it's working. Most people who think they have healthy livers, I've seen I've seen autopsies, I've seen the photos. Their gallbladders are this big, filled with pus and cholesterol and rocks.
You've seen photos?
Oh, I've been in on autopsies. The average person in this country does not have a healthy liver, because the liver has to metabolize the fat that we eat, and we eat more fat in this country than any country of the world.
What do the livers you see look like on autopsy?
Scary, horrible. I see shiny green gallbladders this big. I mean, it's horrible. People's livers are fatty, degenerated, dead tissue, bigger than they should be because they've been overworked, and the gallbladders are plugged up and clogged. And so we need to get into those livers, flush them out, and clean them out too with our good liver flushing and cleansing programs.
People write to me, and one of their complaints is they tried it a couple times, like a little liver flush with olive oil, and they say it didn't work. They're still sick.
Yeah, and this is what happens to me. I get many patients that come to see me, and I say, well, we need to drink some carrot juice, and they go, I've tried carrot juice, and I go, and we need to exercise. They go, I used to exercise, and I'll go, we need to do a liver flush, and I drank one once. My question is, did anybody ever do all of those things at the same time? And that's what the Incurables program is not just one glass of juice or a liver flush the next day, or I'll clean my bowels this week. It's doing it all at once. It's putting this whole program together, the elimination channels, the food program, the exercise, the attitude. You have to put it all together, and then it works. Then it's amazing. I had a woman come into my office, 23 years old, with a malignant breast tumor. She did this program, and in 10 days, there was no breast tumor at all. And 3 surgeries.
A week and a half.
A week and a half. In 5 days, it was 50% shrunk, and in 10 days, it was gone. And all 3 of her surgeons had suggested to have a mastectomy.
Amazing.
Yeah. And so this program's powerful. The reason most people aren't getting well is they're just not doing enough. They're not putting enough of these programs together. The skin. We need to get back to our skin brushing. Dr. Christopher was a fanatic on skin brushing, dry skin brushing, wet skin brushing. Dr. Christopher always talked about...
But isn't that just for healthy people, a trivial technique?
No, it's very powerful. The skin is one of the largest elimination organs of the body. It can eliminate pounds and pounds. I've even seen research showing the skin can eliminate 10 pounds a day of gases, liquids, and solids if it's clear and it's open.
And this... You're saying this is enough to make a difference?
Oh, absolutely.
Now, we're talking terminal cases.
Oh, yeah. We'll go into more detailed, more in depth, but just generally speaking, we got to get that skin working, and the best way to stimulate it and clean it is skin brushing. And natural fibers are very important. Dr. Christopher always made a point about talking about his wool suits from J.C. Penney, and he always talked about the importance of grounding yourself and wearing your clothes, cotton clothes, wool clothes, silk clothes, and getting away from the polyesters and the nylon so your skin can breathe. It's very important that your skin is healthy and can breathe. When your kidneys aren't functioning well, they can use your skin as a backup organ to eliminate.
Now, in a terminal case, what is their kidney function like?
Probably not that good either, and there's a whole nother elimination organ we need to look at. First thing that's important with your kidneys is not consuming any beverages outside of herb tea, fruit juice, vegetable juice, and water, and that's it. That's one of the first ways to heal the kidneys. I mean, you have to stop the soda pops, the carbonated beverages. You have to stop the coffee. Coffee has been proven to be not only create cardiac arrhythmias and tachycardia, irregular heartbeat and speeded up heartbeat, but I've even seen coffee indicated in medical journals as being carcinogenic. And we have to stop alcohol. Alcohol has been proven to cause cancer and liver cancer. It's just the liver boards fight that, and they don't want that on the label. So we have to stop all drinks except for pure water, herb teas, and fruit and vegetable juices. And that's part of the Incurables program too. And forget it. If it isn't in that category, it's over. I think we have to look at a few disease statistics because that really answers it for me. The #1 cause of death in the United States is heart disease. It's estimated that 1 million people will die this year from heart disease. Now, that's a lot. That means that if you add up all other forms of disease and death, if you look at AIDS and cancer, if you look at suicide, plane crashes, auto wrecks, drug overdose, all of those don't equal the amount of people that will die of heart disease. 1 million people. Now, it's possible that this year only 100,000 will die from AIDS. 1 million. Okay, 1 million this year are dying from heart disease. We should see this on the television day and night.
I agree with you, but what's your point?
Okay, the point is out of that million, 990,000 are dying from blocked coronary arteries with cholesterol. Only 1% of heart deaths are caused by other causes. 99% by blocked coronary arteries with cholesterol, and the only source of cholesterol is dietary from animals. That means
But
that
everybody knows that.
Yeah,
Doctors know that.
well, but they don't tell their patients. I had a man in my office a few months ago who had 2 heart attacks, and he went to the 5 top heart specialists in Los Angeles: St. John's, Cedars-Sinai, UCLA, USC, right down the line. He talked with every heart specialist, and I said, "What did they tell you about your diet?" And he looked at his wife, and he said, "Nobody said anything about diet."
It's hard to believe.
Yeah, it's happening. This is what's happening out there. So the first step with the food program is we have to realize that most diseases are eating disorders. It's estimated that 70% of cancers are diet related. And we're looking at heart disease, 99% of it caused by what we're eating.
Richard, what is your dietary program for people with incurable conditions?
The first thing is it's absolutely vegetarian.
Not partially.
Not partially. There's no time to fool around. There's so much wrong with eating animal foods, and we'll talk even more about that when we get into specific diseases.
Okay.
You have to stop 100% of your animal food consumption. That means all meat. That means chicken. That means turkey. That means fish. That means dairy products. That means eggs. You have to go totally to a vegetarian food program.
Are you saying they got to do this for life, or you're not even talking life at that point? You're talking...
When my patients come to me and they have incurable diseases, I say, we'll debate this issue when your cancer's gone, when your heart disease is gone, when your diabetes is gone. We'll sit down and discuss it, and I might be open to a little change. But until you are 100% well, it's 100% vegetarian. Absolutely. Because you look at it, and animal fats are causing dramatic diseases throughout our country that are almost specialized diseases in this country.
Okay.
I mean, your average cholesterol level in China is 122.
What's it here?
200.
Okay.
Average.
All right, so you put them on that kind of a diet. What else? Now, we still got more to say on food?
Yeah, I break it down into 3 categories of that vegetarian food program. The most dramatic dietary change would be juice fasting. If you're dying, stop eating. Okay? If you're really sick, stop consuming food, buy a juicer or get that juicer out and put your fruits and your vegetables through it.
So you're putting them on a juice program then. It's not just vegetarian.
Absolutely. And that is for the worst case scenario.
That's what Dr. Christopher used to do too, with juices.
Absolutely. When you're sick, you don't have any business eating food. It takes too much energy to digest it.
So you don't mean some juice. You mean what? All juice?
Yeah. And
morning to night?
And the problem is most people, when they go on a juice cleanse, don't drink enough. They'll drink a glass or 2, a minimum of a gallon a day. Okay,
that's what
that's
Dr.
8 ounces
said.
an hour of juices, and get that juicer going. Now that's the most dramatic aspect. If you're not dying tomorrow, but you're feeling horrible, and this is the Incurables program, we'll go to raw foods. Okay, we'll just stay on raw foods.
But you're saying that's not enough if you're on the cliff.
If you're on the cliff, you go to juices and you stick with those juices. I had a man come to see me with lung cancer, and he also had a cholesterol level of 350. I put him on juices only, and in 3 weeks that cholesterol level was 132. Okay, that's what you can do on juices.
But what about the cancer? That's the main
well,
thing.
that took a little longer. Yeah, the cancer receded. And this is what happens, okay?
The lung cancer receded?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And the only time I've ever seen anybody get well with lung cancer is natural healing. Lung cancer, of course, is extremely deadly.
Yeah, the statistics are awful.
Statistics are awful.
Okay, so
Prognosis
juice
is awful.
fasting.
So juice fasting. If you feel you got a little more time, go to raw foods, because the raw foods contain more vitamins. When you cook food, you destroy the vitamins. You destroy the enzymes.
But raw foods is a middle ground. It's still not the
Absolutely.
pure, strict incurables program.
Absolutely. And if you want a little breathing room, just be on a vegetarian food program, and that would include, you know, baked potatoes, brown rice, steamed vegetables.
But again, in the absolutely desperate, you wouldn't even let them have a baked
No,
potato.
because that food program that I just mentioned is what I call my health building food program. It's total vegetarian, but you can have breads, you can have baked potatoes, brown rice, cooked grains. That's for a person who's well. That's the food program that I've been on for 24 years now. I've been a vegan
We're not talking
for
people
24
even close
years.
to well.
Yeah, but when you're not well, then you need to go down to raw foods and stay on those raw foods. But if you're really ill, it looks like the corner, you're not turning that corner, you go to juices, and you stay on juices till you're well.
Okay, what else in your food program?
Well, that's basically it. I want everybody to understand that it's vegetarian, and that if they're sick, they go to raw foods, and if they're really sick, they go to juice fasting.
Okay, good.
Other than that, you need to, you know, pick up your books and magazines on vegetarianism, try to make that diet interesting. But you know what? Who cares about taste buds when you're dying?
You probably don't have much taste anyway. For
Yeah,
anything.
absolutely. You probably can't taste much food. So
Okay, is there any preferences on the juices?
basically, no. I would suggest to keep in mind, Dr. Christopher always said, live under your own fig tree.
Okay.
And what he meant by that is use fruits and vegetables that are grown locally and that are in season. That's the whole point. We shouldn't be eating kiwi fruit from New Zealand. That's the other side of the equator. When it's summer here, it's winter there.
Okay.
We should be in this climate right now. Our fruits that are going to be coming up are apples and grapes. We need to stay in harmony with our fruits and vegetables of the environment that we
So
live in.
when they pick the juices, they have to keep that in mind.
Absolutely, because the food that grows in this area right here, Sam, and the herbs that grow in this area are designed for the people that live in this area. They have to live in the same
So in
climate.
other words, they don't go out having mango juice if you live here. and
That's
you're sick.
right. Stick with your local fruits and vegetables and use those
So that's an
juices.
important point.
Even if you just use one. There's nothing wrong with a mono diet of apple juice or grape juice. There's famous books written just about drinking grape juice alone.
Okay.
It's a great healer.